Welcome to Basic Computer Help. Today I'm going to go through the code for my C# project Backround Cycler. Now, due to the fact that Background Cycler is such an extensive program, I'm only going to touch on it. I am not going to actually show any of the techniques that I have used. If you feel up to it, because some of the code is pretty advanced, you could download the source code. I will post a link in the description. It is open source, published under the MIT license, and hosted on SourceForge. Alright, first thing is first, I'm going to show you the class diagram. This is pretty much just a simple diagram I threw together. Well, it's actually been in the program for a while, but I'm using it to show how some of the layouts interact with other aspects of the visual code. Like everything starts in program. There's main inside of program, but most of the code actually happens down here in application info. Even though you don't see too many arrows pointing to it, there's actually a lot of code that calls it and it passes around. I also commented this a little bit with 2 comment blocks just to demonstrate. The actual central part where all the commands come through is actually in setting, which is the main user interface or form. Right now, Background Cycler uses window forms because I started its project in Visual Studio 2005 and did not have a visual designer, a Windows Presentation Foundation available to me to work with. It was in beta. I didn't want to mess with beta for something like this. I actually have, inside of setting, I have 4 custom-made controls which sit in this area, using a tree view to actually control what is shown over here. And I actually did it by just stacking them all on top of each other. What actually happens when the program starts up, it actually hides everything except for what is selected, which is usually about. And then as you check as you check items in there, we actually come over into our event handler to determine what you selected and to show whatever it is right there. The actual meat of this code is actually in the ChangeBackground class, in which I declare a random number generator, a special variable called style, and the only reason it's in there is to actually be easier to show here. Because as you see, I can actually show the relation this way. And it always starts at ChangeBackground, which declares an image, searches the file list, and selects a file and loads it this way. Of course, I have a few error handlers with a nasty little workaround for if a user had their settings set at 3 seconds or faster. This is actually how we find the image. Again, we have another variable for image. We also have a declare where its file name is and whether or not it's actually found an image. I acquired a list of files. This is actually a property that actually goes out and pulls the list. And then I declare a temporary list of filtered files. List, using the actual list generic class is faster than using the string array. And then all I really do is I loop through our list of files, and I look to make sure it's an appropriate file. If it is either a JPEG, a BMP, a GIF, a PNG, or a JPEG, I check to make sure any of those, if they are actually part of the extension that I get up here, and I have the extension switch to lowercase. That way, if it was all in capital letters, or for some reason, like JPEG, if I had capital J, small p, capital E, and capital G, it would still catch it. I make sure that that is greater than -1. That means it's actually found it. And since the original Backround Cycler actually stored the original bitmap in the My Pictures folder, I actually make sure I don't pick that one up. This will actually get dropped in version 6, this check right here. And then I make sure that it's not the last image shown, and the last and not least is a sanity check. I make sure the file actually exists on the file system. And then I add it into the filtered files. I catch any error and I return null, and the actual previous function actually has code to handle it. I then immediately make sure that files are actually left. So if filtered files equals 0, I return nothing. I run a quick do-while loop. Since I already know all this stuff is going to be run once, first thing I do is I get all the filtered files and I randomly grab one. Then I load that particular image in, I determine its style, and if it's actually set to nothing, I actually throw the file out and actually remove it from the filtered files as well. This actually, the determine image style, I'm not going to go into, but it actually just determines the desktop size and then the image size, and then goes from the settings. And then if the style is set to scaled, since Windows XP and Windows Vista at least do not have a scaling capability. I'm not sure if 7 does. I have not looked into it, even though I am running 7. First thing I actually do is resize the image. I make a call to a custom function called scaled image dimensions. Wow. And I just pass it the image size and then the screen size. And then it'll return the actual size that the image has to be scaled either up or down. And then I actually just declare a new image, loading it from the memory with new dimensions, and then tell it that I want the style centered. Declared found image is true. So since this is true, it'll actually escape out of the loop. I set the last image shown to the new file name, and of course return, which actually shows us in here into our Windows API class. I use the Windows API class really to store whatever platform commands that I need, or to store the functions that require use of the platform commands, or pinvoke a lot of the time. And here it's pretty simple. I determine where the background image is going to be, and right here we just clear the current desktop background, which does release the lock on the bitmap with system parameters info, and I pass it an empty string. Then we save out the new image. I catch any exception and just return. Now we have to mess around with the registry a little bit. This is mostly why it's in the Windows API. I have to set a few registry values that determine if it's stretched, if it's centered, or if it is tiled, and then set the new desktop background, because system parameters info will also update the ini files and everything else. I have to make sure that the proper registry keys are set. I also make a few sanity calls in case for some reason nothing got passed or scaled got passed and it can't operate here. I just pass a null argument exception. I know it's a quick and dirty intro into Backround Cycler. Hope you guys download it and like it. Just in case this is what the actual program looks like. Actually has its own context menu and app icon. Right now it's written in WinForms, but in the future I do intend on migrating over to the Windows Presentation Foundation, WPF. Alright, just to show you guys, this is actually a custom style database. It's called a flat database that is actually used to store the contents of this list in. Pretty much a flat database is simple. One line represents a piece of data separated by a new line, and that's literally it. I had experimented with XML, and XML was too slow after you got past just 100 images. I have a few fans of my program that are photographers, and they have well over 1,000. It would have taken them too long to load the program. This is actually relatively quick. Basic sanity checks. So